we're about to see, which is fantastic. Caroline on the right with the second place LAIC list, the Entei Iron Valiant combination. We're going to see Tachyon Bits trying to set up lots of evolving Pokemon on Tobias's side.
Well, I mean, we haven't seen Entei Iron Valiant on stream yet today, and I'm excited to see the...
You get the Valiant, of course.
Yeah, the Tachyon Bits going crazy and accumulating damage. And it can be so threatening early on against Charizard. Before it evolves, you're always worried about that potential for a full board wipe. With the Iron Valiant, even with the potential of a Yoga Loop.
Yeah, that's definitely a threat. And it's always a question, actually, I think, for when you're coming up against an Iron Valiant variant, do you even choose to go first or second as these vulnerable evolving archetypes? Because you could come away not even drawing a card for the turn if your opponent is able to get enough Tachyon Bits developed, and even a Yoga Loop if they've gone second. So it's a real interesting one here to see how these players navigate it. Once you've got to this record, there's a decent chance that they've sat next to each other at one point or another.
Well, we'll see how that goes, and look at those prizes there.
The prizes.
And the Squawkabilly as well. So the Squawkabilly is an interesting one because they have 2 in the list, and it's for this exact scenario why you do it, because it's so key in those early turns to get that early Tachyon Bits accumulated. But of course, the Entei is present in both of these decks, sometimes in the Charizard too. And so do not be confused. It is a Charizard deck with an Entei in the active.
Tobias is kicking things off with a fleet-footed. Actually a relief to have such a high hit point Pokemon in the active position right now. I do see a Nest Ball in the hand. Not sure how much else ball search wise, so it's going to be down to Tobias to try and develop the Charmander, obviously eyeing up a 70 hit pointer, give yourself a little bit more defense. But Caroline started with the Iron Valiant, so Tobias already knows what he's in for here.
Yeah, exactly, and Iron Valiant start, not too bad because you're most likely going to be switching in plenty of time, so sometimes even the Iron Valiant in the active can reduce the amount of switch outs you have per turn, but on this occasion the hope is that that hand has a ball search of some sort in it to at least get things going, because the Squawkabilly would be the first bet if you've got a hand full of not much else.
Yeah, and that's the great way to dig deep into the deck. If you have a supporter, sometimes you go for that first, just so that you guarantee lots of draw and have Squawk on the other side of the hand. But you've got to fill your bench up, no matter what. And it's going to be majority Valiants, but also you want to get Entei into the active position as quickly as possible as well, because when you go second, you can attack with this on the first turn, thanks to the combination of a turn attachment plus Magma Basin. And Squawkabilly EX actually helps in that endeavor, because it can help you discard those fire energy early on.
So we've spoken a bit about Charizard here and you know where it is right now in the format, but there's sort of 2 distinct variants of it. You've got this variant here with the Entei, where you have access to the Forest Seal Stone, but there's also the Evolution version. Explain the difference between those 2 Charizard EX decks.
So this is a Pidgeot EX build, as we are seeing an attachment from Tobias in. That's going to be the last action of their turn. And the Pidgeot one is a bit more vulnerable, I would say, to the Iron Valiant Entei list, because especially there's 50 hit point Pidgeys in this deck list. So it may be that Tobias goes without an engine all game, actually.
Oh, it doesn't look like a great starting hand here, and this is one of the challenges.
Oh no, that is super unfortunate. There's the Future Boost Energy Capsule to free retreat, and there's going to be a Tachyon Bits here, but I believe Caroline just has Fire Energy, Basin, and Super Rod in hand. This is not what you want to see.
And that can be the real challenge with the Valiant list, is there is a lot of cards you do not want to see in that first hand. You know, there's so many switch outs, which if you don't have the ball search as well, can be quite tough. And Magma Basin is only activated once you had a bit of a turn going.
Right.
So there's a lot of cards that in that first hand will really throw you off.
Yeah, missing a lot of your turbo cards. There's Battle VIP Pass, there's Trekking Shoes, there's Nest Balls, there's all your supporters available. Missing all of them. The deck doesn't even play that many energy, so to have all of these is a real headache. Tobias did have Iono in hand, but when your opponent just does nothing, it's better to fish out, literally, with Luminion here, a better supporter choice. And in this case, it's going to be the Forest Seal Stone plus Ultra Ball combo. So we could start to see Entei attacking this turn via a Rare Candy Charizard play, and we start accelerating these energies from the deck.
I mean, that's it. Once you get that Charizard in play, it suddenly swings heavily in favor of the Charizard EX.
Yeah.
That early pressure disrupting the build of the deck, getting the small evolving Pokemon. Unfortunately, that has not been available here for Caroline, even though they were going second as well, which is typically favored to help you set up more.
You would think that really improves your odds. So many more supporters that you could see. As Tobias is going through the motions, we've already seen the search for the Charizard. No surprises. here that it's going to be a rare candy. Following up, it's going to go onto the damage Charmander. I would think this makes the most sense. So it just forces even more from Caroline if she is going to bounce back here. And you've got to think that Entei is going to get into the mix and get a little swing going here with Burning Rondo.
One of the weird advantages of getting a slow start here is the Entei doesn't have as much damage, so you do have a few more turns to work with. Not that that's typically your game plan, but on this occasion, the Entei will only be doing, I mean, at this point, 100 damage. Yeah. And with the potential of going up to 140 with 2 more bench Pokemon for Tobias. But yeah, the start is the key. And we spoke about it before, about deck building. And with the Iron Valiant Entei list, its start can be either incredible or awful. And it sits in that weird realm where if you get going, you're getting going really well.
And the top deck is a switch. That is not what we're looking for. And Caroline has to be thinking at this stage, can I bring this back from this stage? We are going to see the switch, so we can get a Tachyon bits down. There's no guaranteed KO, as we are debating where this damage is going to fly from the newly promoted Iron Valiant EX. It is going to go onto the lower hit point Charmander. There's really still not much going on at all here. Maybe debate to attaching a Fire Energy just to the bench here. Yeah, I don't mind this, just to pass things over. So at some point, possibly you could pay Retreat Fire to get that Magma Basin activation, but it's a really niche play for such a poor situation that she's found herself in right now.
You see that Mew there? That is a great card in so many matchups, but this is one where you're worried about it. It's so simple for Valiants to get it in range of a Yoga Loop or just to knock it out in general. So tend to avoid putting it down in a matchup like this. You want as few of those low HP Pokemon in play as possible.
Yeah, that's how Caroline gets back into the game. If you are feeding these Yoga Loop targets, so it's not going to show up in this occasion. Tobias has a really nice discard of double Battle VIP pass with Ultra Ball here. Got to feel like it's either Charmeleon or just the Charizard if we have access to Rare Candy here, because you're pretty happy just smacking with Charizard, honestly, in this matchup. It doesn't get too tricky. As long as you get to this stage, you're just too meaty for the opponent.
Yeah, and then you don't need to bench much more. Once you've got Charizards in play, you might go wide early on just to have as many options to evolve. But at this stage, one Charizard, and it's only 2 prizes as well when they get that knockout, so they have to go through so many more. And the Entei works as a great early attacker in this matchup just to keep the pressure on. And the Jirachi there as well to deny the Yoga Loops. Doesn't deny the Iron Valiant Tachyon Bits ability because it's only attacks. But of course, will stop those Yoga Loops.
Tobias with the escape rope, so we'll be able to finish off this damaged Iron Valiant and really put the pressure on Caroline here. Obviously 100 damage previously from the Entei, so we are going to initiate this prize race. And I believe we're going to be in that space where we're looking for a top deck, and if it's nothing, oh my goodness.
Not what you want to see.
The odds of that are phenomenally low. Caroline's going to scoop things up. That was a rough one. We didn't really get to see the fireworks. We didn't get to see any highlights of Entei Valiant there at all. But we can only hope that it gets better in the next game. You're not going to have an easier win than that, 5-0.
I mean, for all of you in chat who are going, I want to see Entei Valiant. Unfortunately, that's not what you wanted to see if you're a big believer in the deck. But that is the case for any deck. You know, we spoke about you being in Warsaw. I believe you were on stream and you had a Bidoof in the active attach pass.
Oh, you had to remind me of that, did you?
Yeah. And, you know, you had a very consistent deck, and that can happen. And it doesn't matter how good you are at Pokemon. Sometimes you have those tough games. But that's why we do best of 3, giving the opportunity to win 2 of those 3 games. Yeah,
I remember doing a discipline scoop thinking, oh, I've got time to win a game 3, and I ended up losing the set because I did a concession to go to a game 3 and then just had Bidoof and nothing else, which is pretty rough. But for Caroline here, we have 42 minutes still on the clock, so she can turn this around, certainly, especially because this archetype can really stop the opponent from setting up altogether. And if that happens, it's going to be a fast game. Sure, Tobias could make her go through all 6 prizes, but when your opponent is not really coming back with anything, it's a really good way to speed up the game plan and get into not only a game 2, but also a game 3 here. And let's face it, we didn't really see much of the archetype at all. The only thing she did reveal was Fire Energy, so Tobias knows that she is playing the Entei build, but I feel like that's relatively expected regardless. So we're going to get into this game 2. There's the Radiant Charizard prized for Tobias, which is a little bit frustrating. Not too much awkward for Caroline here. And let's see, first of all, it's the double Entei lead, and Caroline is forcing Tobias to go first. I really like this choice.
Yeah, and of course the Entei and the active gives you even more draw, so that helps. The fleet-footed per turn will help the consistency of the deck, but Entei lead for Tobias is definitely probably the dream start.
Yeah.
In this matchup, so to have it in both games, great for them.
Yeah, there's nothing more terrifying than just having a Pidgey or just having a Charmander, especially a 60 hit pointer, would be really awkward. So having the Entei to kick things off is phenomenal, and also has Nest Ball, I believe also Ultra Ball in the hand as well, so can get multiple basics developed here, which is the best way to protect yourself, not only from Iron Valiant EX, but also from Escape Rope, because as we've mentioned, that when Caroline does go second and fires on all cylinders, she can launch attacks with Burning Rondo from the first turn of the game.
I mean, Caroline is going to ignore this Entei. If there's anything on the bench that they can target,
100%.
They would love to loop that or completely knock out all the Charmanders before they can even evolve. And so we'll see how the rest of this turn pans out. So like you said, the Ultra Ball available, the Mew, like we said before, not a great one to put down because it can't evolve out of range of those loops.
Yep, shows Tobias has good grip of the matchup. Doesn't want to have this low hit point 60 HP Pokemon to be a fresh Yoga Loop target throughout the game. Even if there is, Jirachi developed later on in the game, it can just be pinged down via Iron Valiant EX. So don't want to give the opponent the freebie ever, and it's just going to go for double Charmander here. Once again, Tobias not even leaning into the Pidgeot, which in so many other matchups is critical. I also really like this turn attachment onto the Entei. It means that you're not reliant on hitting a Candy Charizard on the second turn in the game. There's also thinking ahead right now. Well, we're going to have a better start here.
This is where it could be crazy in this matchup.
Oh, wow.
You have no idea how intense this matchup can get, especially when you find a Battle VIP pass off the fleet-footed. Things are going to kick off here, and we're going to find out whether there's enough Valiant on board to start that loop on a Charmander.
Yeah, we're going to see Caroline go through the deck now to see grabbing some Valiant. Squawkabilly is also a great target here. I didn't spy any other ball search in the opening hand. Didn't quite get to have a full look.
There was a few Forest Seal Stones, but you want to save those.
There's Colrus. Yeah, there's a few options for her. But this is exactly what you want to see. I mean, right off the first game, and you're straight into it with a Battle VIP pass from the fleet-footed, and you're feeling that your luck can be turning back in your favor. That's exactly what you need if you're going to flip the script and end up winning games 2 and 3.
Fleet-footed feels like one of the best draw engines into Battle VIP Pass. The amount of times I've seen it happen, even though it's only a draw one, it feels like it happens more than ever. And on this occasion, it will do. And then there's an Iono in hand as well, which will probably be the best way to see as many cards as possible. We'll get the Forest Seal Stone down.
Yep.
You've got the Tool in hand as well, so you've got that established. You just need to find as many switch outs as possible then.
Yeah, it could still end up being Colrus just based on how many cards remain in Tobias's hand. But as you say, if you want to have the absolute most amount of dig, it would be via the Iono.
Oh yeah, so both the switches here. That's going to get it close to the range and the Tool onto the active, so that's another switch already sorted.
Nice. Yeah, a couple Tachyon bits early. The way we're playing the hand down means it probably is going to be the Iono. I still feel like this is best. I don't mind even attaching the next Forest Seal Stone just to never see it again, but it is going to go to the bottom of the deck here for a fresh 6 cards. We're looking for, well, Valiant plus Medicham double turbo energy, some sort of combination there. The Forest Seal Stone can always grab us one of those pieces, let's not forget.
Squawkabilly for more dig.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, we're getting there. We are getting there. We have Squawkabilly, we have Nest Ball Switch as well, so we can get another Tachyon bits now, then Squawkabilly, then we have the Forest Seal Stone as well, so we should be seeing a turn 1 Yoga Loop here.
Well, my goodness, this is what you wanted to see Entei Valiant for. It's these kinds of turns, aggressive going second turns, that completely disrupt the board state of these evolving decks that are so popular right now. That Charmander on the bench just needs one more Tachyon bits and a Yoga Loop to start Caroline's second turn straight away.
Sheesh, here we go. We can freely retreat this Iron Valiant, but we have Switch anyway, so you can just play the Switch proactively now. And just in case you draw your next Future Booster Energy Capsule, rather than retreating proactively. But this is fine too, you're still cashing in. You could even promote Squawkabilly with Switch here if you want to.
Okay.
But it is just going to be throwing away the Switch. That's also fine. It just means that if you draw into your next Future Booster Capsule, it's not live. But these 6 cards don't need to find much. There's another Switch out. Okay. Oh, but we've actually missed the way to Yoga Loop, by the looks of things.
So it might
we
just
do
go for
have
a knockout.
Magma Basin, yeah. We did just discard a Fire Energy with Squawkabilly. Ooh. The issue is that you have Switch in hand, so you might have to Forest Seal Stone for just a Switch cart and just take out the active.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, if it wasn't an Escape Rope that came off there and it was just a switch, or 2 switches or something like that, you might have been able to just naturally through Tachyon Bits the other Charmander and get the knockout on the one that's in the active here.
Yeah, you do not want to play this rope because you've just essentially lost your 60 damage that you've just worked so hard for. And even if we see Tobias evolve, we know that Caroline is playing the Technical Machine Devolution, so that damage is really important to keep around, and that's why we're seeing Caroline reaching for the V-Star marker here with Forest Seal Stone.
Is that just to get that final knockout?
It's got to be a switch, I believe, because you want to keep that damage around for the Charmander. It's going to be... Was it a supporter for next turn, possibly?
I think it was a switch. There's a Colress in hand. So
I see. I
think you were right there calling out the switch on this occasion. So
it's a little more sense to me.
Powerful first turn here, but not quite the full reach to board wipe the Charmanders.
It's a surprise. I thought we were at the dream state, but the 6 cards from Squawkably weren't ideal. But it's still going to be a phenomenal turn. We're still taking a prize. We've still set up this Charmander really nicely.
This was a bad turn.
She passes. Interesting.
Okay.
So I think it was a potential supporter for next turn.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the pace at this point, you do have the ability to knock out...
it was a switch, but not used. Interesting.
You do have the ability to knock out the big things. You've got the Radiant Charizard at the end as well. So a Charizard EX with, 8 damage on from Tachyon Bits would be in range of a Radiant Charizard. So that's a way to knock out the bigger Pokemon where Entei might struggle to reach that high. Yeah,
but 8 is a key threshold as well for that TM Devolution. So
True.
It would just be one more Tachyon Bits to be pretty happy about the situation. And it also puts Tobias in that strange position of having to possibly evolve their benched Charizard, and then they essentially lose an energy to having to pay retreat as well. That can be a pain. You know, it might even bait the opponent to use the Magma Basin to put damage on their other Pokemon, which is kind of still playing into Caroline's hands. So we are seeing the Ultra Ball now.
The TM Devolution is a great little backup plan. If you can't disrupt completely at the start, you have that sort of mid-game or late-game board wipe that you can also bring out. And that's where we spoke about the different strategies that you can use. I'm sure a lot of people with the Entei Valiant list were thinking, how do I deal with Charizard if they set up? And they went, well, I'll completely destroy the whole setup with that Devolution.
Yeah, we've seen the fizzle. So having that comeback mechanic card, even though it's not really a comeback card, it's sort of giving you time in the matchup to still make your damage counters relevant. So we are seeing Tobias Arven for the Rare Candy Forest Seals combination. We've already seen the Charizard picked up via Ultra Ball. So we are going to see the Charizard EX hitting the field now. And it is going to be the active position, having the highest hit points, just being a huge hurdle for Caroline to get through here.
And the advantage as well with the devolution strategy is you don't ramp up the power of that Charizard EX.
Sure.
You know, every single knockout you take, Charizard EX will gain 30 more damage with Burning Darkness, 180 plus 30 for each prize card taken.
Yeah, so keeping off that map until you can take everything out of play at once could be fantastic. Tobias also is trying to ignore their Pidgeot at all costs because they don't want to get that into play, but it means that if there is a devolution combo happening, you just have to naturally have rare candies available, and that's also a real headache. So Tobias really wants to work towards also getting Charmeleon in the mix here, I think.
So there we go, there's that Forest Seal.
There's another rare candy in hand, though, so could go Forest Seal Stone for another Charizard, honestly.
Maybe that's what we'll be seeing here. Looks like
it's going to be, definitely makes sense. Not every list is playing that Technical Machine Devolution. Even if they do, it's a 1 copy. So we are going to cash in on the second Charizard here and just have as much bulk as possible.
That's something you mentioned about, you know, these two have probably seen each other's lists from being on the top tables for the last few rounds.
The archetype, at least, but not the actual 60 cards, exactly.
Yeah, you won't know exactly what techs they've got here and there. And TM
we have Caster Vision.
Yeah, definitely one of those cards that they're not going to be sure of. You can assume, you can play around it, but you can never know for sure.
So it looks like we're just going to be dealing the 180 here with Burning Darkness.
2 rare candies used as well. Could be huge at the end game if the devolution comes through.
Never feels great having to punch into some of these Pokemon, but that's how it is with Charizard. You start slow and you can ramp up to a really strong late game. And let's see how Caroline can capitalize on this now. Has multiple switch cards once again in the hand.
Well, that will allow lots of damage in play, but nothing right now in range of a knockout.
Yeah, we're going to see the Colress here. You get to see 5 and keep 3. There's not much synergy in the deck, but it's just a deeper dig towards combinations, especially because you like to hold on to certain switching cards. It means you can just make things happen.
I wonder if the Colress has been a tough pick or two here and there in this list. There is a lot of cards that you can get rid of, but ultimately your deck is quite tight. You don't have a huge amount that you can just throw away, and it will tend to be those consistency cards like your Nest Ball, and on that occasion a Jet Energy.
Sure.
Can be quite a tough decision.
We're going to see a second Entei hitting the field now. That could easily be your Jet Energy combo if there's another fire in the discard pile. But just going to be the turn attachment of fire is also fine, making sure you've got multiple available. We're going to see the first switch into Iron Valiant, and it's going to be a Tachyon Bits. We're going to get to that key threshold of 8 that we've both identified as massive helpers here towards Caroline's overall objective. So even just punching in with Entei here, it may look pretty average, but as long as we get towards that technical machine, it's going to be huge.
Yeah, and on this occasion, both the Charizard will be in range of the TM.
And Entei staying out of range as well, which is massive on the comeback. So Tobias, again, wouldn't be too happy just punching into the Entei V, would want to move around this as well. I believe the only supporter in hand is Avery. That would give Caroline the chance to get rid of Squawkabilly and the damaged Iron Valiant as well.
And 160 is a reasonable number right here, because with just one of your Iron Valiants, that will put the Charizard in range of a knockout with the Entei. But as we mentioned before, the ideal scenario here is not have to worry about knocking out. You don't want to start ramping up that Charizard EX damage.
Tobias is just debating this Avery just because they need cards, quite simply. You don't want to do this because it makes the board state better for Caroline. It frees up room, you get rid of the Squawkabilly, it's done its job, and now it can go freely to the discard pile, as well as the damaged Iron Valiant EX. That has to be the right choice, I think, in this spot. It's always going to be the Squawkabilly, there's no doubt about that. There could still be a debate based on how many switching cards are available. That's why it was a small debate, but feels pretty reasonable to hit the discard pile with 4 copies in the list.
The one Super Rod available, so
still,
not out of the game forever. But this deck isn't really about motoring things into the discard back in that sort of like a contingency plan. So Avery can be quite disruptive at times.
I'm going to see the Choice Belts. Actually a massive pickup here, because the Entei has had 20 damage from Magma Basin. And that means we are going to be seeing a knockout from Tobias. And this might have surprised Caroline, because Choice Belt isn't always in these Charizard lists anymore. Oftentimes it's been subbed out for the likes of Defiance Band or even Justified Gloves. So that's a huge pickup from the Avery.
Huge. And I mean, Arvanzard has the ability to find all of these different tools that are so useful at the right moment. So Choice Belt definitely suited to the Arvan version of Charizard EX here. No, that is huge there. What other matchups would that Choice Belt be used for?
Well, great question. Getting that 280 threshold is important on V-star Pokemon sometimes, and even just regular V Pokemon. But as we're seeing more and more EXs into the format, I feel like it's still, more people are leading towards the Vitality Band, which is still played by Tobias, but also the Defiance Band. So it surprised me to see it, honestly.
Maybe for a first knockout on a Raikou?
Yeah, it can be important for Raikou, possibly. But you're not that afraid of Raikou, honestly, in the matchup. You're quite happy to see your opponent take one prize card with a Raikou, and then you just swing anyway. So yeah, it's a surprising spot, but it's working out nicely for Tobias now, as Caroline is going to get some switching done with these Tachyon Bits spreading now onto an Entei V. And I think we have a big research here to see if we can find, if we can see a Devolution this turn, it would be monstrous.
Well, there we go. There's the Vacuum. And that will be able to get rid of the Choice Belt, I guess.
Yeah, certainly targeting Choice Belt.
Don't want to see that again.
No, that's done its job. Let's see the big 7 cards here. Will both these Charizard be picked up and leave Tobias with just an Entei remaining?
Huge opportunity here. Is it in the hand? It's not in the hand there.
It's just the 1 copy.
It's always tough when you haven't got an easy way to search for it.
Yeah, it's in the deck. And we are quite far through the deck, in fairness. But now Caroline might be having to have the contingency of actually having to knock out the Charizards the old-fashioned way with damage.
Well, if they get close enough to knockout, there might be a Yoga Loop opportunity.
True, that's also an option.
And you could just board wipe them through, hitting them twice.
It's that easy.
Makes it sound so simple.
You see the Nest Ball for another Entei V now. I feel like you want to hold off the Magma Basin just in case your opponent has any more damage modification.
Yeah, the switch cards can help put your Enteis back to that 230 hit points, but I guess you wouldn't even think to play around Choice Belt in this matchup.
No, I wouldn't have thought of it, to be fair. You're normally thinking of the switch card to help out against, for example, Roaring Moon. Forcing them to Frenzied Gouge would be huge, but yeah, I think everyone's surprised by the choice of the Choice Belt there, and it was really handy.
So 120 damage there from the Burning Rondo. So that's going to put that Charizard on 200 down, so 130 remaining.
Yeah. This isn't ideal because, you know, you basically spent a turn when you could have found Devolution and just wiped the opponent's board pretty cleanly. But you're still being patient. You're still not taking prize cards, and you're still making these Charizards pretty wimpy right now.
I mean, the ideal scenario here would be to knock out the Entei before you board wipe, so there's more Pokemon in play.
Sure.
But that is still quite a tough target. That Entei has got 190 remaining. You have to really fill out the board or get lots of Tachyon bits involved.
Yeah, there are a couple of switch cards in Caroline's hand. And Tobias still not really with many options, to be honest with you. This is what happens when you don't establish your Pidgeot. You can see why they haven't, of course, because the matchup kind of demands that you don't. It's too fragile, too simple for Caroline to take easy prize cards on it. But it does mean that Caroline can have this slower approach. And it's going to work out here. She's taken 180 to the dome with this Entei, and the Devolution comes to the top. This is going to be massive.
Like I said, though, if you do that, the Entei from the bench can come into the active, and they can maybe start trying to set up more Charizards. So
you could go, I think, using the fresh Entei on the bench is your best strategy here.
Whilst trying to get the Entei in range of the Charizard deck.
Yeah.
Tobias's Entei there, not quite in range of...
Going to be a quick Magma Basin coming in. So this Entei is also powered up to attack with Burning Rondo after you've used Devolution. Do need to put a couple counters on. We're all following along. There's also the chorus as well. I mean, the Devolution seems like an incredible play here. Really game-changing.
And you get too fleet-footed in the process too.
Pretty cheeky. Keeping up on those draws. We're not even going for any Valiant shenanigans. We're keeping these switch cards available because we've already identified that the best play here is going to be devolving 2 Charizard EXs and wiping out basically everything on Tobias's field in one turn. Let's see the facial reaction from Tobias here as we see the Devolution come down. It really is a game changer.
Well, we've seen that in lots of the list. You wonder what it does, and this is exactly what it does.
That's a huge play.
So the Charizard's
EX to hand, but everything else is gone. And it's a big 2 prize knockout for Caroline. But bigger than that, really. It's not just 2 prize cards being taken. It's leaving Tobias with just an Entei V remaining.
And that Entei V, the advantage of it is it's not got many bench Pokemon to power up the opponent's attack, but it needs its own bench Pokemon to power up its own attack. So this is now heavily back in favor of Caroline here.
What an incredible swing turn. The Technical Machine Devolution. Everyone feared this card because we've seen it's basically a spiritual reprint of back in the day. Technical Machine Rock, I think it was, where it picked up some Pokemon. And yeah, it's still proving that even in today's formats, even with so many large basics, that it can be devastating.
How long ago was that?
We're talking the EX era. We're talking 2007 or so.
2007?
Yeah.
My goodness, I'm sure lots of people watching weren't even born then.
We're going to see a boss's orders, though. So Tobias is going to be able to go down to 2 prize cards, I believe, here with the damage. So keeping up in the race, at least. And let's not forget that they also play Radiant Charizard. So with this boss's orders, they're still right in the mix and still could bounce back.
It was prize for Tobias, but probably will get it off of this knockout, which is probably why they're comfortable taking the knockout.
Definitely seems like the right way to keep up in a race here.
Okay, so
100 damage.
Okay,
We've got 150 on us.
Out.
Pretty sure we're there. Yeah. There's 150 already on.
Maybe they're asking about something else, just checking in on something. This is one of the key parts of competing. You've got to make sure you're very clear to each other. You know, these players have been using their ability markers to help each other understand what's going on, but communication is so key in these big, important moments to make sure everyone is clear on what's going on.
I believe Caroline also picked up a really important card in their own Radiant Charizard. So I feel like weaving that in is your best defensive play this turn.
Oh, yes.
Tobias is down to 2 prize cards remaining, so using your own Radiant Charizard, getting your Entei out of the line of fire, forcing a single prize Pokemon into the active position, seems like a massive play here.
Well, there's a Battle VIP pass there. That's the easy one.
It seems like 2 pretty good candidates. The double turbo also can hit the lost zone fairly comfortably. There's a Jirachi in play, so we're not worried about Yoga Loop shenanigans so much.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the Charizard now powered up for free with the Magma Basin. That was not a concern. Didn't need to find the energy. That was already in play. And now that Charizard will, like you said, for the prize map, will be key because that'll allow them to get one prize Pokemon in the active getting a knockout, and it will also mean that Entei, which we said was so out of range, is now back in range. So Radiant Charizard into the active. Caroline will be taking a big knockout here and asking the question of Tobias, how do you respond to this?
Yeah, and is holding on to switching outs, so the Radiant Charizard could move in and out quite happily. And let's see what Tobias can construct here. It's going to be their own Radiant Charizard. Do they have the escape rope combination here?
Is it there?
It's a large hand size. It is.
There it
The
is.
escape rope actually means that Tobias is going to get the 2-0 victory. Incredible scenes. The 2 Charizard EX were wiped off the board, but no matter. Entei bosses orders into the Radiant Charizard from the prize cards, let's not forget, with the escape rope combination. What a fantastic endgame sequence there.
Oh, Radiant Charizard really showing its worth in both situations there, asking more questions and answering them in the same 2 turns. And that is exactly why Charizard EX is looking so strong right now. The options that are available for that deck, even when your main Pokemon gets taken off the board with the devolution, could still find a way to victory in those final turns. The end game of Charizard EX is phenomenal.
Yeah, it doesn't just mean that you're hitting, the 300 plus threshold. Also, just having that really powerful single prize option for 1 energy attachment, actually using your opponent's stadium in this case, meant that you needed so little to actually get over the line there. That huge threshold of 250 damage. It's absurd for 1 energy attachment. That's why Radiant Charizard is so powerful, and we see it in so many archetypes.
Well, just think back to that turn where 1 card away from getting a Yoga Loop off.
Yeah.
And if you get that Yoga Loop onto the first Charmander, knock out the other one, suddenly that game is going completely differently. Even finding the devolution a few turns earlier, something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
The whole game completely switched up just based off of the Entei Valiant not quite hitting the high heights that it can do in those early turns.
Yeah, you thought when we're seeing that many cards and had the fallback of Forest Seal Stone, it was inevitable that was going to be a Yoga Loop, but the Squawkabilly didn't really give us much, and that meant that the window was open for a double Candy Charizard in 1 turn, and even though they weren't taking knockouts, they were setting up enough damage so that even Entei itself could come in and get a revenge KO on the opposing Entei from Caroline there. And you know what? When there's this many just low hit point 2 prizes around, you can have a pretty routine map actually. And that's how we saw the conclusion of that second game.
That's why Arven is so good with Charizard. So often you need an item and some other card, and the fact that you can get the Forest Seal into play, and obviously starting the Entei in both games. So it did
very helpful.
Very much Charizard EX played well this game and had the luck in their favor a little bit. And unfortunately, Entei Valiant didn't quite reach the heights it can do. But that's the difference with some of these decks right now. Iron Valiant lists can be a bit inconsistent because they don't have a draw engine built into them. They don't have the sort of the constant flow of cards coming in like a lot of other decks do, where Charizard EX, you've got such good tutor to find exactly what you need at any given moment. You don't need to draw as many cards because you find it when you need it.
Yeah, it didn't even put the engine into play. The Pidgeot that you're using to cherry pick throughout the game, you just forego it that whole time and say that you can do enough with your bulky Charizard, and in that case, it did work out. You do sometimes associate the Valiant variants with having like stuttering at times, like we've mentioned, but you normally expect it in the late game. It's normally you get your early board pressure, you take some single prize knockouts, you disrupt the opponent, but sometimes Iono puts you in that tough position where you don't have enough to close. You very rarely expect that with a supporter to play and a Squawkabilly available, that you just drew 4 of your 5 Fire Energy that you have in your deck in the opening stage, as well as a Super Rod. Like, those are the only late game cards that you really own in your list. So having just no option in those opening stages was a little bit frustrating, but they're on a 5-row record. They're still very likely to make it in to day 2 of the competition. We still have 3 rounds remaining today to get 1 more victory, plus just getting a tie naturally or via IDing with an opponent in those latter stages will put you onto that 19 match points. That's what every player out in the field is looking for as a minimum to make it into the second day of our competition.
Yeah, I mean, Caroline did so well to go 5-0 with Entei Valiant, a deck that was a great pick coming into LAIC, made it to the final, and of course a lot of people inspired to bring it here, and you could see why. You could see the potential there, and I mean, everyone playing against it sits down and goes, please don't go full turbo mode on me, because if you do, I might not get going. And I wonder for Caroline how many games she's won going first with that early turn Tachyon bits. It can sometimes go